The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gravel parking lot of Murphy's Trading Post, a weathered building that had seen better decades. The smell of diesel fuel mixed with the earthy scent of Iowa farmland as 18-wheelers rumbled past on Highway 30. Sarah Mitchell sat on her battered suitcase, staring at the empty space where Marcus's pickup truck had been just 20 minutes ago. Her engagement ring felt heavy on her finger as she replayed his words. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. You're holding me back. Find your own way to California. Or don't." The Trading Post's screen door creaked open, and a woman with silver hair pulled back in a practical ponytail emerged. Eleanor Harper had been watching the scene unfold from behind the counter, where she'd been tallying the day's receipts for her diner next door. "Honey, you've been sitting there a while," Ellie said, her voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who'd raised 3 children and buried a husband. "Everything all right?" Sarah looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "My fiancé. He just drove off. Left me here." Her voice cracked. "We were moving to California together and he just changed his mind about everything." Ellie studied the young woman, well-dressed but practical clothes, calloused hands that spoke of honest work, and a resilience in her posture despite the tears. "Where are you from, sweetheart?" "Columbus, Ohio. I'm a furniture refinisher. Was helping Marcus start his construction business in LA." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Guess I should have seen the signs when he started complaining about my hobby taking up space in the garage." The wind picked up, sending dust swirling around the parking lot. Ellie made a decision that would change both their lives. "Well, you can't sit here all night. Cedar Falls isn't much, but it's got warm beds and good people. Come on." "I couldn't impose—" "Nonsense. I'm Ellie Harper. I run the diner here. Got a spare room that's been empty since my youngest moved to Des Moines. You look like you could use a hot meal and a night to think things through." As they walked toward Ellie's well-maintained Ford pickup, Sarah noticed the small town spreading out beyond the Trading Post. Main Street was lined with buildings that had character but showed economic strain. Several storefronts were empty, and the remaining businesses looked like they were hanging on by threads. "Is that your diner?" Sarah asked, pointing to a cheerful blue building with white trim and flower boxes that somehow managed to look thriving despite the surrounding struggles. "That's Ellie's kitchen. Been feeding this town for 15 years, since my husband passed. It's not fancy, but folks know they'll get an honest meal and someone who'll listen." As they drove through downtown Cedar Falls, population 3,200 according to the welcome sign, Sarah saw a town that was fighting to survive. The old movie theater was boarded up, the hardware store had a for lease sign, and even the bank looked tired. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, surprising herself by meaning it. There was something authentic about the tree-lined streets and well-maintained homes, a sense of community that her suburban Columbus neighborhood had lacked. "It's struggling," Ellie said honestly. "Young people leave for bigger cities, farms are getting bought up by corporations, and businesses can't compete with the big box stores in Waterloo. But there's good bones here. Good people who aren't ready to give up." They pulled into the driveway of a white Victorian house with a wraparound porch. Gardens that were clearly Ellie's pride bloomed along the walkways, and the house emanated the kind of warmth that comes from decades of love and care. "This is home," Ellie said simply. "Come on, let's get you settled. Tomorrow we can figure out your next steps, but tonight, you're safe." As Sarah followed Ellie up the porch steps, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of belonging. Behind them, the setting sun painted Cedar Falls in golden light, and for the first time since Marcus's truck disappeared, Sarah felt like maybe being left behind might not be the worst thing that could have happened to her. Sarah woke to the smell of bacon and fresh coffee drifting up from Ellie's kitchen. Sunlight streamed through gingham curtains onto a guest room that was simple but welcoming. A quilt that looked handmade, fresh flowers on the nightstand, and furniture that was old but beautifully maintained. Downstairs, Ellie was already dressed for work, her gray hair braided and pinned up. "Morning, honey. Sleep okay?" "Better than I have in weeks," Sarah admitted. It was true. She'd slept deeply without the anxiety dreams that had plagued her for months as her relationship with Marcus deteriorated. "Good. I've got to open the diner, but you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. There's food in the fridge and the coffee's fresh." Ellie paused by the door. "You mentioned furniture refinishing. Mind if I ask what kind of work you do?" Sarah's face lit up for the first time since yesterday. "Restoration, mostly. I love taking pieces that people think are junk and bringing them back to life. I specialize in mid-century modern and arts and crafts period pieces." "Interesting." Ellie's eyes twinkled. "Well, if you're up for it later, come by the diner for lunch. I'd like you to meet some folks." After Ellie left, Sarah wandered around the house, appreciating the craftsmanship in the original woodwork and built-ins. In the basement, she discovered what had clearly been a workshop. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, and a workbench bore the patina of decades of use. Around noon, she walked the 6 blocks to downtown, really seeing Cedar Falls in daylight for the first time. The architecture was stunning. Victorian houses, a beautiful courthouse from the 1890s, and commercial buildings with the kind of detailed stonework you rarely saw anymore. But the economic struggles were obvious too. Too many empty storefronts, peeling paint, and an overall sense that the town was holding its breath. Ellie's kitchen was bustling when Sarah arrived. The diner was clearly the heart of the community. Farmers in work clothes sharing coffee with retirees, young mothers with toddlers in high chairs, and what looked like the entire staff of the courthouse grabbing lunch. "Sarah," Ellie called from behind the counter. "Come meet some people. This is Tom Bradley. He runs the hardware store that's still hanging on. And Mary Chen. She's our librarian and unofficial town historian." Tom, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers, shook Sarah's hand. "Ellie mentioned you work with furniture. We don't get many craftspeople through here anymore. Most of the young folks with skills like that head to bigger cities," Mary added. She was perhaps 40, with an infectious enthusiasm despite the town's challenges. The miller's grandson was a carpenter, but he moved to Chicago last year. As Sarah ate Ellie's homemade meatloaf, she listened to the conversation flow around her. There was genuine affection among these people, a sense of shared investment in their community's survival. Tom mentioned struggling to keep his store open against competition from big box stores. Mary talked about programs to attract new residents and businesses. "You know," Mary said thoughtfully, "we've been trying to figure out what to do with the old Steinberg building. Beautiful space, but it's been empty for 2 years since the antique shop closed." After lunch, Mary offered to show Sarah around town. They walked past the empty storefronts, but Mary pointed out the potential: high ceilings, original hardwood floors, large windows, perfect for workshops or galleries. "The Steinberg building is the real gem," Mary said, stopping in front of a 2-story brick building with gorgeous arched windows. "Mr. Steinberg ran an antique and furniture store here for 30 years. When he retired, no one wanted to take it over. The rent's reasonable. The landlord just wants someone who'll care for the space." Sarah pressed her nose to the window, peering into the empty interior. She could see the bones of something beautiful: tin ceilings, built-in cabinets, and a space that seemed to whisper possibilities. That evening, she called her sister Emma in Columbus from Ellie's landline. "So you're staying in Iowa?" Emma's voice carried across the connection. "Sarah, you need to come home. Get your apartment back. Rebuild your business here." "Maybe," Sarah said, but her heart wasn't in it. "Emma, what if Marcus was right about one thing? What if I was playing it safe? I had a good setup in Columbus, but I wasn't really building anything." "You had a successful business." "I had a workshop in a garage and a handful of regular customers. Here." Sarah paused, looking out Ellie's kitchen window at the quiet street. "Here feels different, like maybe I could build something that matters." As she hung up, Ellie appeared with 2 cups of tea. "Feeling any clearer about things?" "Actually, yes." Sarah surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. "Ellie, what would you say if I told you I was thinking about staying? Maybe opening a workshop here?" Ellie's face broke into the kind of smile that transformed her whole being. "I'd say Cedar Falls could use someone who sees potential where others see problems. And I'd say you look more alive talking about it than you did all yesterday." Outside, the summer evening was settling over Cedar Falls, and Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years: the excitement of possibility, of being exactly where she was meant to be. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in the middle of the empty Steinberg building, her voice echoing off the tin ceiling as she talked on her borrowed cell phone. "Mom, I know it sounds crazy, but this feels right," she said, walking between the shafts of morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows. "The rent is 1/3 of what I'd pay in Columbus, and there's something here, a real community." Her mother's sigh was audible across the connection. "Honey, you're running away from your problems. Come home, rebuild what you had." "What I had wasn't working, Mom. Marcus leaving was just the final push to admit it." After hanging up, Sarah found Tom Bradley waiting outside with a truck full of supplies. Over the past week, he'd become an unexpected ally, helping her assess what the space would need. "Brought that electrical wire you wanted," Tom said, unloading boxes. "And I talked to Jim Morrison. He can do the wiring at cost if you help his wife refinish their dining room set." This was how things worked in Cedar Falls, Sarah was learning. Currency wasn't always money. It was skills, time, and mutual support. She was already trading furniture restoration for services, advice, and friendship. "Tom, can I ask you something?" Sarah said as they carried supplies inside. "Why are you all being so helpful? You barely know me." Tom paused, considering. "You know, when my hardware store was about to close 3 years ago, this whole community rallied around me. Ellie organized a fundraiser. People committed to buying local even when it cost more. Mary helped me set up an online presence." He gestured around the empty space. "We've learned that when someone wants to invest in Cedar Falls, we invest in them. Simple as that." The morning was spent planning the workshop layout. Sarah had sketched designs for a restoration area, a showroom, and space for classes. An idea that had emerged from conversations with Mary about bringing new skills to the community. Teaching workshops could be brilliant, Mary had said the night before over dinner at Ellie's. "We have so many people with furniture they love but can't afford to have professionally restored. And it could draw people from Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, even Iowa City." Around noon, Ellie arrived with sandwiches and 3 women Sarah hadn't met yet. "Sarah, I want you to meet some more of our neighbors," Ellie said. "This is Janet Morrison, Jim's wife, the one with the dining room set. Patricia Webb, she teaches high school art. And Rebecca Santos, she runs the daycare center. We've been hearing about your plans. Patricia said, her enthusiasm infectious. Rebecca and I were talking. What if we could coordinate? I could bring my advanced art students here for workshops on furniture painting techniques. Rebecca's been looking for family activities to recommend to parents. As the women talked, Sarah felt the project expanding beyond her original vision. This wasn't just about her building a business. It was about creating something that could serve the whole community. There's something else, Janet said quietly. My grandmother's hope chest is in our attic. It belonged to her grandmother before that. It's beautiful, but it's been damaged by mice and neglect. I always thought it was beyond saving. Could I take a look at it? Sarah asked. That afternoon, in the Morrisons' attic, Sarah knelt beside a cedar chest that was clearly a family treasure. The damage was significant. Chewed corners, water stains, a broken hinge. But the basic structure was sound, and the carving work was exquisite. Oh, Janet, Sarah breathed, running her hands over the detailed woodwork. This is incredible. Probably the 1920s, and the craftsmanship is museum quality. Yes, I can absolutely restore this. Janet's eyes filled with tears. Really? I've been carrying guilt about it for years. My grandmother would be so happy to know it could be saved. More than saved, treasured again, the way it deserves to be. As they carefully carried the hope chest down to Tom's truck, Sarah realized this was what had been missing from her work in Columbus. There she'd restored beautiful pieces, but they were just objects. Here, every piece had a story, a family connection, a meaning that went beyond aesthetics. That evening, the three women gathered at Ellie's kitchen table, planning the workshop's opening. I think we should have a community celebration when you open, Ellie suggested. Show people what you can do. Let them see the space. Make it an event. What about that hope chest? Patricia added. If you restored it as your first big project here, it could be the centerpiece. Show people what's possible. Sarah looked around the table at these women who'd become her friends and supporters in just 2 weeks. You know, when Marcus left me here, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything. And what do you think now? Ellie asked gently. Sarah smiled, feeling more certain than she had in years. I think maybe I needed to lose the wrong thing to find the right one. This feels like home in a way nowhere else ever has. Outside, the summer evening was alive with the sounds of a small town settling into night. Screen doors closing, children being called in from their games, the distant hum of conversation from front porches. For Sarah, it was the soundtrack of belonging, of putting down roots in ground that was ready to help her grow. 3 months later, the October air was crisp with autumn as Sarah put the finishing touches on Janet's restored hope chest. The transformation was stunning. What had been a damaged, neglected piece was now a gleaming testament to both the original craftsman's skill and Sarah's restoration expertise. It's perfect, Janet whispered, running her hands over the smooth, restored wood. The intricate carving was once again visible, the cedar interior sweet-smelling and pristine. Grandma would be so proud. The hope chest would be the centerpiece of tomorrow's grand opening of Second Chances Restoration. But it represented so much more than Sarah's business. Over the past months, as word spread about her work, she'd restored pieces for families throughout the county, each project strengthening her connection to the community. Sarah, you need to see this, Mary called from the front of the shop, where she was hanging bunting for tomorrow's celebration. Outside, Sarah was amazed to see a line of pickup trucks and cars stretching down Main Street. People were unloading furniture, carrying pieces into her workshop. What's happening? Sarah asked Tom, who was directing traffic with the authority of someone who'd been helping neighbors their entire life. Word got out about tomorrow, Tom grinned. Folks wanted to bring pieces they've been hoping to restore. The Hendersons brought their grandfather's rocking chair. Mrs. Patterson has a vanity that belonged to her mother. The Kowalskis drove over from Waterloo with a whole dining set. As Sarah looked at the growing collection of furniture, each piece representing family history, memories, and hope, she felt overwhelmed by the trust these people were placing in her. "This is incredible," she murmured to Ellie, who'd arrived with coffee and her famous apple cider donuts for the volunteers. "This is what happens when you give people hope," Ellie replied. "You showed them that broken things can be beautiful again." That's a powerful message in a town that's been feeling broken itself. The grand opening the next day exceeded everyone's expectations. The workshop was packed with people from Cedar Falls and surrounding communities. Children watched wide-eyed as Sarah demonstrated furniture refinishing techniques. Patricia's art students displayed paintings they'd created inspired by before and after photos of Sarah's restorations. But the real magic happened when Janet's great-grandmother's hope chest was unveiled. "This chest has been in my family for over 100 years," Janet told the gathered crowd, her voice strong despite her emotion. "I thought it was beyond repair, that I'd failed as its keeper. Sarah didn't just restore the wood. She restored my connection to my family's history." The crowd was silent, moved by the visible transformation and the story behind it. Then Rebecca Santos stepped forward. "I want to share something," Rebecca said. 3 months ago, my mother was diagnosed with dementia. She kept talking about her sewing machine, the one she brought from Mexico when she was young. We thought she was confused. It had been in our garage for years, too damaged to use. Yesterday, I brought it to Sarah." Rebecca gestured to a beautifully restored Singer sewing machine, its cast iron base gleaming, the wood cabinet lustrous. "When I showed it to my mother this morning, she smiled for the first time in weeks. She remembered teaching me to sew on this machine. Sarah gave me my mother back, even if just for a moment." As applause filled the workshop, Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. This was the miracle Ellie had promised. Not the supernatural, but the deeply human magic of community, connection, and the healing power of preserving what matters. Mayor Williamson, a practical man who rarely made speeches, stood up. "Sarah, when you first came to town, some folks wondered if you'd stick around. Small towns have seen too many people come through with big plans and bigger dreams, only to leave when things got tough." He paused, looking around the crowded room. "But you've done something different. You haven't just started a business. You've reminded us that Cedar Falls is worth investing in. Today I'm announcing that the City Council has approved tax incentives for new businesses that demonstrate community investment. We're betting on people like Sarah and people like all of you who've supported her." As the celebration continued into the evening, Sarah found herself standing outside the workshop with Ellie, looking at the bustling Main Street. Several of the empty storefronts now had "for rent" signs that actually looked hopeful rather than desperate. "You know," Ellie said thoughtfully, "when I brought you home that first night, I thought I was just helping someone in need. I didn't realize I was bringing home the person who'd help save our town." "Ellie, I need to tell you something," Sarah said. "Marcus called yesterday. He's back from California. The construction business failed. He wants to come here, wants us to try again." Ellie's expression didn't change, but she waited. "I told him no," Sarah continued. "Not because I'm angry anymore, but because I finally understand what I was looking for all along. It wasn't a person or a place. It was purpose. It was being part of something bigger than myself. And you found that here? Sarah looked back at her workshop, where people were still gathered, sharing stories over their restored treasures. She thought about the families who'd trusted her with their heirlooms, the students learning traditional crafts, the community that had embraced her so completely. I found that here, she said with absolute certainty. Marcus leaving me at that trading post was the best thing that could have happened. It brought me home. As the two women walked back toward Ellie's house, passing neighbors who called out greetings and thanks, Sarah realized that the miracle hadn't been one moment. It had been every day since she'd chosen to stay, to build, to belong. Sometimes the greatest miracles were the ones you created yourself. One relationship, one restored peace, one act of faith at a time. Behind them, the lights of Second Chance's restoration glowed warmly in the autumn evening, a beacon of hope on a main street that was learning to believe in itself again.